those pigments. Okay, so recording in progress, it
Yeah,
says.
sorry. Is that okay, Becky, that we record this?
Yeah,
I
that's
just
fine.
remembered.
That's
Okay, I'm
fine.
sorry to interrupt you. Go
Hope
on.
I don't say anything wrong, but this is the best I know. Okay, I'm not a chemist. In fact, that was my worst subject in school, but as far as working with pigments and using them on a practical level, I think I'm doing that pretty much. I love to experiment with different colors. So, and the pigments have been ground down through the centuries. If you've seen the film Girl with a Pearl in Her Earring, the girl with a pearl earring, great, and it shows her, she's assisting, what is it, Van Dyke, with by mixing his colors for him in the morning, and she grinds it in a mortar and pestle and then mixes it every day for him. So pigments have changed through the centuries, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Watercolor can be either opaque or transparent. Opaque watercolor is also called gouache, Gouache. It's very similar to, I think the student version of that would be poster paint, or what we used to use in school. But it was developed in our time, especially for illustrators to use. So it dries to a very nice matte finish. It's fun to work with, but it is not the least bit transparent. In fact, I think a lot of the colors, they basically mix white with it to make it non-transparent. But when you're done with a painting, you can still wet it again, which can be an advantage or a disadvantage. However, transparent watercolor, which is what I'll be talking about today, most of the pigments are either transparent or semi-transparent. There are a few that are really opaque, and that affects your painting quite a bit. If you have the beauty of transparent watercolor is that the paper shines through, and so that white behind it makes it luminous looking. Today we have a lot of water media on the market that I think is confusing people a lot. But it's acrylic based and it dries not water soluble. You can't rework it. You cover it up with something else. And it does not have the transparency, so you add white where you want white, usually, I think. But I'm a little bit afraid that real transparent watercolor will disappear in the next 50 years or so. There is a society, the Transparent Watercolor Society of America, puts on an international show once a year, which is I try to get into every so often, and so far I haven't been accepted, but one of these days maybe. And their rules are very interesting if you ever go on site to read that, because they insist on using the transparent pigments only and painting in a transparent manner. So it helps you be more aware of the difference between opaque and transparent watercolor. And I'm getting really, really boring. That's what I was afraid of today. When you look at pigments, good laughing at me, Barbara. When you look at pigments, a chart of pigments, for instance, they'll usually have a list of different characteristics of them. One of the most important is light fast, but all of our pigments these days, except for a few disasters, are light fast. And people are more and more putting UV protectant acrylic or glass over the top of their paintings. So that's not so much an issue as it was, but a few years, 50 years ago even, watercolors were really disrespected because they faded so quickly. And So I think that we should be aware that today's pigments do not fade that much. They're also much more intense, many of them. So something you look, there are basically, well, five. There are five main characteristics in pigments that you look for. One is light fast. One is whether it's opaque or transparent or semi-transparent. One is whether it's intense. That means how strong the range of the color. If you can use it, if it's say a purple, does it start out very, very pale purple, and then when you add a lot of water to it, but it can go down to a very, very dark, almost black purple. That's a wide range of colors. Other paints just have a small range.
Can you repeat that term? The range of what?
Well, intensity.
Okay, thanks.
There are other words for it. Strength, maybe. They can get awfully technical. I'm going to try not to get technical today. I'm not made for technical things. And then another consideration is toxicity. But again, that's not an issue these days. They've mostly taken the toxic pigments off the market and replaced them with others, with a couple exceptions that I'll mention as we go through the list. And the last one is granulation. And this is unique to transparent watercolor, because as you get the paper wet, the pigments of some of the pigments are especially heavy, and they'll float around in the water and settle, and that gives you a granulated effect. It's a texture. Some pigments, like I say, do granulate mainly because they're larger pigments and heavy ones. Most of the new pigments are very finely ground, and they don't do that. But if you want granulating pigments, there are quite a few that do. And by the way, Daniel Smith's line of Primatech watercolors is especially designed for people who like granulation. And Dawn, could you show, she has a painting that shows granulation. Okay, that's a close-up. You'll see this is part of a mountain, rock, a side of rock. And so it's especially useful, that texture is. Okay.
It's like using salt.
Salt is another way to get texture, but
Okay.
the salt, I think, dries the water, so the pigment then collects around the salt and creates texture that way. And I think almost any pigment will granulate. There's also granulation medium, and they now have it in a spray, which I just ordered, haven't used yet. The granulation medium you can mix in your water, or I just dip my paintbrush in the bottle and then in the paint. And that does exaggerate and encourage granulation. Also, in what I read on the internet about granulation, the kind of paper you use affects it. If you have paper that has pockets in it, if you have paper in it that has pockets in it, so you're laughing at me now. If you use a rough or cold pressed paper, it's more likely to granulate than smooth paper. However, that said, I use Yupo a lot, and you can see granulation on it like crazy. That's one thing I like about Yupo, because on Yupo, which is a plastic surface, the pigment just sits right on top of the surface. So you're looking directly at pigment. Well, the water dries up, and the gum arabic dries up. Okay. Any questions at this point?
No.
Okay. Are you still awake?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
I was laughing because I thought you were just
Junk.
answering and hanging up your phone.
I know that's spam. We all get those calls, Becky.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what it is. It's spam.
It makes you want to go to a mobile phone. It makes it hard for those of us who still have a house phone too.
Yeah.
Okay, so of course, in your reference guide, I've got some of the historically how we develop different colors through the centuries. I think you'll find that interesting, the older palettes. But really what we need to be looking at is what we have right now on the market. So what I'd like to do is, pardon?
Excuse me for butting in. I can photocopy what she's talking about and have it available either an email or maybe our website. I don't know if I'm breaking any rules by providing that on our website.
That would be nice.
It's fine with me.
Okay.
Chris, I have that document. I can just send it to you.
Yeah, I think I sent that to Dawn.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you for making those packets available at the museum. I was able to get one yesterday. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Did you notice the little bubble, what do they call the buttons of color on the one? They sent us
Yes.
samples of paint.
Yes, nice.
You ever use those, Jerry?
I haven't used any from Daniel Smith. I have used them from, the Core, the company that does Core colors. They've sent these out and we have used
Cool.
those. Yeah, but it's very fun to do.
It is, it's amazing how long they last.
Yeah,
I did about a dozen greeting cards one time.
just
from
one, just
of
from
those
that.
small core,
Mhm, mhm.
or however they pronounce it.
Yeah.
What do they do? What are the dots?
The dots, they're actually watercolor.
You see it?
Wet, and you have a little bit of watercolor there to use.
Yeah.
Oh, you can use it? You can, oh,
Yeah.
you can use it right off the,
Yes.
oh,
I didn't really intend this to be a hands-on presentation, but if you want to play around with those dots while I'm talking, you're quite welcome to.
Oh,
I thought we'd take a walk down Watercolor Street and notice the different houses along the way and different families that live in them and talk about them for a bit. I've been teaching my students families of colors for quite a few years. Let's see, the oldest house on the block and one of the biggest rambling old house would be the Earth family. These literally are the oldest pigments, and it's an amazing family. They were using the earth colors, literally earth, mud, or clay from various parts, usually of Italy when they first started. I guess they mine it in France now, but a lot of the earth colors currently are chemically manufactured. But for instance, Daniel Smith's Primatech line would be the old clays, and you'd actually be working with the dirt. By using these different clays, they found, around Siena, I believe Siena, Italy, and around Umbria. That's where our names of Siena and Umbra come from. Ochre, I'm not sure. When you heat them, they turn more reddish
Yeah,
color.
it's down there. I'll get it in a little bit.
Okay, if you heat them up, they turn more reddish, so we get burnt umber and burnt sienna. Iron oxides are composed of iron and oxygen together, and they're inexpensive. They're very light. They have the highest light fast rating there is. Most of them are opaque and they're dull. But that's why they're making modern versions which aren't dull. In other words, on your watercolor painting, you don't want to have nice luminous transparent colors, and then have, you know, it looks like a spot of dirt on the middle of it. So you want to watch not to get really, not to mix. That's one reason not to mix too many opaque pigments with transparent pigments, because they stand out as different. And that's another reason. Let's see, I wanted to mention, should have already mentioned this. I don't want to talk about white or black today. White and black are both very opaque, and they're more in the area of gouache than they're not transparent watercolors. But you can
Excuse me,
mix.
Becky. Did you say that Daniel Smith's Primatech line is made with life? It's not as dull? This Primatech line, is this still dull, or have they made it different?
Primatech is made from the original, as I understand it, from the original rocks or clays or whatever.
So it's still dull. It would still be
Yeah,
that.
they're
Okay.
the old formula.
Okay.
They even offer a paint that's made from, I don't know how it's pronounced for sure, lapis lazuli. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah. Yeah.
So gemstone and
Yeah.
and with turquoise. So and I'm not sure they're worth all that much. The only colors I really love in Primatech are green and blue apatite. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. They granulate, both of those granulate wonderfully. Okay, so that is the oldest house in the neighborhood is the earth tones. That's what the cavemen painted on the caves that are, you can still see them. So they're very durable colors. I have heard it, this says they're opaque, but I think that a lot of them are semi-opaque. So the earth tones depends on which manufacturer and which paint, whether they're opaque or not. Another house is the Cobalt family. It's just a small house. Not very many people live in it. It's they were discovered in the 1800s, and they're toxic. So teach your kids to stay away from them. They're toxic when inhaled, and their cerulean blue, I was surprised to find that, is a combination of cobalt blue and chromium. So cerulean blue is one of my very favorite colors. So it's kind of a cousin of the cobalts. Cerulean is semi-opaque, and it's a blue that tends toward green. So it mixes beautifully for if you want to mix greens. It's a great place to start. Another very old family in the neighborhood is the cadmium family. And excuse me, let me back up a bit to the cobalts. There's blue cobalt. Cobalt blue is the most famous by far. It's a medium blue. It's kind of, I think of it as like light blue jean color that you've worn for quite a while. And it does not have a very wide range. If you're doing a sky, cobalt's great for it. It does granulate. It's not a greenish blue or a reddish blue. It's just smack in the middle. And they do also have cobalt green, cobalt turquoise, which I'm currently in love with. Holbein makes a cobalt turquoise that is to die for. But I don't eat it or breathe it. Okay. So any questions at this point? Okay. If we go to the cadmium family, now this is
Excuse me, I just had to unmute myself. So if you mix your cerulean blue to get a good green, what do you mix it with? What do you like to mix it with?
well, if you want a spring green, Hansa yellow light is wonderful. If you mix it, it's a blue green. So if you mix it with an orangey yellow, you're going to get more of a grayed down green. You know, it's just too many pigments. many primaries in there. I like to mix cadmium blue with, or excuse me,
Cerulean.
cerulean blue. It makes a great gray also when you mix it with browns. And very granulating. So I actually use a lot of cerulean,
Thank you.
but it doesn't, you know, it is semi-opaque. Okay, to the cadmiums, they are still on the market and they are toxic. So we would have to be, you know, warn our children, don't play with it. Don't play over there. They were developed in the 1800s and they have beautiful, the cadmiums are beautiful deep shades of orange and red and yellow. They're some of the most opaque watercolors and some of the most intense. They have a huge range of color from very light to very dark. So it's a wonderful color family. But the fact that it is dangerous is causing most manufacturers to switch to more modern colors to replace them. So we may see new cadmium on the manufacturers' lists one of these days, which means that it's no longer using the cadmium color. You know, I need to back up. Something else I forgot to say, which is each pigment has been assigned a number. So, for instance, if I could read this, some of these labels are so small you can't even see them. If you look at your paint label, you can generally see this one is Holbein, which is made in Japan, and they taped an English label over it, English and several other languages. So you see the word Prussian blue, and you see and then very, very tiny, I can't even read it. It tells you the pigment. It would be B something something. PB, B is blue, and then 27 maybe, I can't really read it. But let's take another. Now, the American made colors tend to be a lot easier to read the label. This is Prussian blue from Daniel Smith. It says PB 27. So you know what pigment is in the tube of paint by reading the label. Sometimes it tells you whether it's transparent or not and so on like that. But I would strongly recommend, what I do all the time is to get online and like on Daniel Smith's website or whatever manufacturer you want to buy from, or Dick Blick has lots of manufacturers on it, and most of them, when they list the individual tube of paint that you could purchase, same with Cheap Joe, their American Adventure, American Journey paint is pretty good quality. It's not student level. If you look at the tube of paint, generally you'll see a place where you can click beside it that tells you more about the paint. And then you can look up the number of, you can find out what pigments are in it. And if there's more than one pigment, or if it's several or one, most students should begin with single pigment colors, I think. Then they get used to those pigments, and then they start using what they call convenience mixtures, like green and purple and orange, mixed together with 2 or 3 other pigments.
Becky, can I just say, during COVID, a friend said to me, let's get together with all of our paints and let's make a sample, like a paint chip. We spent hours because different companies will have a name for something, but that little formula is the same. Yeah, it can be different. So we could compare Daniel Smith with American Journey with Winsor Newton on one color. It was real interesting. And I have gone back and used it as a reference. I made a notebook of it. It was just an interesting exercise to do during COVID.
Right. Yeah, I found that out when I needed I was at that store that I guess it's closed now. I forgot what they call it in Indianapolis. And they didn't have a Daniel Smith cobalt. And I needed cobalt pretty badly. So I picked up a tube of Holbein, which I'd never used before. And I went home. It was cobalt hue, which was a little bit less expensive than cobalt. Holbein makes the cobalt. They also make a cobalt hue. And that was a big learning experience for me because I did a painting with that. It's a gorgeous color. It's gorgeous. But I then looked up the information online and found out there wasn't a grain of cobalt in that thing. It was made of phthalo blue. And I forgot the other blue that was involved. But if I'd known I was painting with phthalo, we'll get to them in a little bit. They're notorious. They really, so that's why it was such a very bright color. And it in no way replaced cobalt. I don't understand that thinking, but whatever. So I did learn to read my labels a little bit better. I've been used to Daniel Smith, which pretty much has single pigments in a lot of their paints. But I noticed they came out with lavender. And I thought, no, how could you have lavender? Transparent lavender watercolor. Well, you can't. I read the label, you can have purple mixed with white, which is gouache. No, not transparent watercolor. So anyway, moving right along. The cadmium family, yeah, they're not quite as toxic as they used to be. The chemists have been doing their best to reduce that toxicity. But yeah, and they throw in other chemicals too. Like it says here, by 1880, they increased selenium in there. So a couple of other families, the azos. If you read a list of pigments and you come to all these unpronounceable names, that pretty much clues you into the fact that these are modern pigments. And I think that the modern pigments really came into being mostly because of the automotive industry, which had the money to experiment. And the automotive industry needed color fast, bright colors, cheap. And so we benefit from their discoveries. Also, the printing industry needed inks that were cheap. They didn't worry about color fast, but they wanted them strong colors. And so artists have benefited from that. So when you go down through a list of colors today, you get online and you're looking for a blue or whatever, or a green or whatever, you find, especially yellows for some reason, are all these unpronounceable names. So I'm trying to, again, to organize them into family groups. There's a family of azo family, and these are still growing. They're young families. They're producing new children all the time. So azos are mainly in the yellow to red range. They're very light, fast. The yellow is, azo yellow is especially useful. And the Hanses, I mentioned Hansa yellow, and that's a short version of a really long chemical name, I think. They've been around for quite a while. Hansa I think is just purely yellow. Yellows, they have a light yellow, which is greenish. It's a cool yellow. And then they have medium Hansa and deep Hansa, I guess. And those are more of an orange color, very dark for yellow. Yellow is a difficult color to find much variety in. the quinacridone colors are especially useful. Now, so on your block, on your street here, this would be a huge house with kind of a mother-in-law area. So they're most of the quinacridone colors, and they've been developed definitely from the automotive industry. They tend to be in the reds and pinks and purples. I don't think they have any yellow except gold. We'll talk about that in a minute. These are very transparent. They're very light fast. That's what their greatest value is. It's the fact that they're light fast. And they're not very intense. You have to use quite a bit of quinacridone pigment to get a strong color. So they're very good for layering. If you like to what's that called? Layer or glaze your watercolors to build up color gradually. So you can take a light glaze of one of those colors over your whole painting. It gives you quite a different mood. We're just beginning to discover how great this family is. But there are 2 or 3 colors. Let's see, they have, magenta. Quinacridone magenta is wonderful. They have several numbers assigned to them. So they're, for instance, the purple is PV for violet. And the coral is a pigment by itself, PR for red. And lilac also is PR. Your different manufacturers label them differently, as Jerry was mentioning. So you have to try out and read your numbers and try and figure out what's in that paint. But I will tell you that the magenta is a fabulous color, and it is transparent, and it really makes your shadowed areas very interesting. And mix it with add it to your greens for variety. And a lot of people complain you can't find enough, can't make green interesting. But there's 2 or 3 colors here that are oddballs. So they kind of have a house and back there. Burnt orange, which is probably the best color on earth, is quinacridone burnt orange, and then quinacridone gold. And there are a couple similar colors, deep gold and sienna probably, and burnt scarlet, that sort of color. And different manufacturers give them different names, but they granulate. The other quinacridones don't granulate, they're transparent, but these colors do granulate beautifully. So I would just buy some quinacridones personally and get used to them, because they're here to stay. They're the burnt orange and the gold in particular are very important colors to have on your palette, in my opinion. The notes say they may take the place of the whole earth family in time, but I don't know. They're not. I kind of doubt that. They don't really go brown. They're too alive to be brown. Then another color that we mentioned, the phthalo family, the phthalocyanine family. Sometimes it's spelled PTHALO. Sometimes they leave the P off, just THALO. These are an organic pigment, like the modern pigments are. The modern chemically developed pigments are considered organic because they have carbon in them. And I don't understand all that, but whatever. The phthalos are have been around for quite a while, and they usually are in the green and blue family. Winsor Newton, I think, started it off with calling it Winsor blue, and then they had Winsor green, and they had Winsor blue in the red shade and Winsor blue in the green shade. So these phthalo colors are very, very, very strong. They're very intense. and they don't granulate. They stain. So if a pigment is very large or dense and granulating, it's also usually easy to pick up off your page if you don't want it there. You re-wet it and pick it up with a paper towel or whatever. But a color that's staining will get, even on Yupo, these phthalo colors and some of the quinacridones. They're very fine pigments, and they soak down into your paper and stain it. So if you want to go to remove it, it's very hard to remove. So you have to be really committed to phthalo to use those colors. I know when I first started painting in Lori Amick's class, I bought a big, huge tube of, because they were not expensive, the American Journey paints, big, huge tube of phthalo green and a big, huge tube of phthalo blue. And until I quit using those colors, my paintings were always, I like to do flowers a lot. My paintings were always really kind of, what can I say, garish colored, a lot of them. They lacked subtlety. The phthalo family is not usually very subtle. You get it involved in, and you've got some very opinionated characters going on. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions or comments? So I would use phthalo judiciously and make sure if any new paints you buy, especially greens and so on, is there phthalo in that green? And if so, you know it's going to stain. But it should be a strong, and phthalos are beautiful colors, just that they can overwhelm everything else if you're not careful. Another one of the newer families is the Pyrrole, Pyrrole, and also the Perrine, Perin, I think INE is how that's spelled. And you know, different companies spell them slightly different manufacturers, but these are attempting to replace the cadmium colors. So they have really strong reds usually, and sometimes yellows and oranges. They're good to mix with other colors. Cadmiums are not very good to mix with other colors because they are opaque. But the Pyrroles are color fast, light fast, and they are intense. They do not granulate. Some are semi-transparent and some are transparent, just depending on the manufacturer. But my notes say that they are brighter than cadmium colors. They are very bright. So if you wanted to get a strong red, or a fire engine red, or really strong orange, the Pyrroles are the way to go. Okay. I think that takes us through most of the notes that I gave to you. There are a lot of pigments that are not covered in the reference guide that I gave to you. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit more about mixed colors. Here's an example of Daniel Smith permanent green, it's called. Now, what's going to be in permanent green? Well, they have a brown, which is a transparent brown, benzene something or other brown. They have Hansa yellow, and they have phthalo green. Their sap green, which is a beautiful color, has nickel azo yellow, phthalo green, and quinacridone gold. Their deep sap has Hansa yellow, Hooker's green, and quinacridone gold, which is weird because Hooker's green is already a mixture. Hooker's green has black in it, generally, in most men. Each manufacturer is different. If you read their list of pigments, they include Hooker's green is quite an old-fashioned favorite green, and so is sap green. But each manufacturer has a different sap green, right, Jerry? And then they have undersea green, which is quinacridone gold with ultramarine blue. Okay, so just so you know, the pigments to avoid because they are fugitive. I'm just gonna have to wing it here. I don't see notes on it. Alizarin crimson. These are the three that stand out in my head that are still on the market and still pretty popular. But you need to be aware that depending on the manufacturer, they may be very, what have you got there? Talk to me, Dawn.
I'm muting myself. Oh, I'm just showing you my tube of alizarin crimson.
Okay, what does it have on it for a pigment?
It says light fat, PR83.
Said, oh, that's the number. Okay.
The tube might
PR80.
be too small to write what's in it.
Yeah, so you'd have to look up that number. The original, I suspect that's the original alizarin crimson. Because if it wasn't, it would probably have a couple of quinacridone colors in it. The original alizarin crimson was, and when I started painting with Lori, it was one of the favorite colors because it's an intense. It has if you're painting flowers, it has, or portraits, it has a wide variety range from pale pink to a really deep, almost black. And that's always wonderful in a color. But this color is what they call fugitive. In a couple of years, it'll be completely faded out unless you have it under UV protectant glass, and even then it might fade. It's not all dependable. Another color like that. So avoid the original alizarin crimson. I think that many manufacturers have what they call alizarin crimson, but if you start looking at the pigments, they're actually quinacridone. So Jerry, talk to us. Jerry, talk to us. Unmute.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, this is what my friend and I did. This was her idea. And there is a permanent alizarin crimson from Winsor Newton. It's called PR 206. But then the regular alizarin crimson Winsor Newton is that PR 83. Is that what she said her number was? They look pretty much the same. I'm sorry, I'm not holding these very well, but it says permanent. So that means it has a different number to it. So what does it have? Something else in it that's making it less light, that makes it more light fast, do you think? More color fast?
I've got a list of those numbers,
Yeah.
and I'd be glad to send this to people if you want it. PR 83, is that the number you said was on the one too?
Yeah, that one, right?
And it said permanent alizarin crimson?
No, that one was just regular.
Right.
But the permanent one says PR 206. It's this one. Can you see a PR 206? And what is it? What does it say?
PR 206
Yeah, what does that say to you?
is a quinacridone.
Oh, so interesting.
It's a mix of quinacridone, carmine, brown madder, burnt scarlet. So they've come up with their own mix too.
Interesting. Wow. So that would be, that would not be
That would be
fugitive.
that would be permanent,
Yeah. Oh,
as
well,
permanent as we get. So avoid PR 83. That's the original alizarin crimson. And
Thank
as
you.
Jerry's pointing out, it is on the market still. Another color is,
Oh,
So-
Becky, sorry to interrupt you. And you're saying that PR83 alizarin crimson is a fugitive color?
yes,
What's this fugitive color mean?
just what it sounds like. It disappears. It
Oh, it's
shows up
not
on,
light fast.
correct.
Oh, that's all it means. Okay.
Well, there's some technical differences. Some colors change color through the years, but basically don't use it. It doesn't stay the way it should stay. Another color is to avoid is opera.
Mm.
Was developed for the printing industry, I believe. It's an dye. It's a dye, which is dyes are not usually very permanent. And it's a beautiful, Cheap Joe's, as far as I know, still puts out opera pink. It's it's the only color that is exactly like the flowers you're painting. When you're doing flower painting, you get pretty desperate for pinks, right, Jerry?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. I love opera.
Yes, but I mean, be sure and put UV protectant glass over it if you do, or plexiglass. Another very fugitive color is rose, genuine rose madder, which is made from roses. I used to buy the Winsor Newton tube and smell it.
Oh.
It just smells just like roses because it's made from roses. But it doesn't, that color does not last. And the people I was reading on the website were making a very strong point that we owe it to the people that buy our paintings not to give them colors that aren't going to be sticking around if we know ahead of time, given the fact that there are other colors out there that are light fast. We have a choice these days. We should be sure to stay clear of ones that are not light fast. And
I
then
don't want to belabor the point, but on Alizarin Crimson, can you read in that guide? This one is a Daniel Smith permanent Alizarin Crimson, and their number is PR177. Is that the same thing, that it's a mixture?
That's anthraquinoid red, straight.
Straight. Interesting. Well,
Anthraquinoid
thank
red.
you. Thank you.
So they've evidently, each manufacturer will take the same pigments, buy it from the pigment companies, and then they mess around with it. So one manufacturer can have an anthraquinoid red and another can have the same anthraquinoid red, and they may be very different colors.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's see. The yellows, there is azo yellow and bismuth yellow, Hansa yellow, isodoline yellow. To me, the yellows are a mystery. They have so many different colors. One thing to be careful about, Naples yellow is generally a yellow mixed with white. So if you want transparent color, avoid Naples yellow. By the way, have you ever wondered why it's called New Gamboge? The original Gamboge was made from, and the same with Indian yellow, made from cattle urine. I kid you not.
Excuse me, so what about the azo and the bismuth and the one that started with an H? What about those? Yep. Were they also fugitive?
No, these, I'm just going through different individual pigments. They're not families, they're just individuals.
So they're okay to use?
Yes, these are the benzene. When I first started doing yellows, I got so confused until I realized that they very often have 2 or 3 different names. PY151 benzimidazolone yellow is also known as azo yellow, AZO. It's semi-transparent. You can go through the list and just look at the different yellows. I don't see anything in particular to mention about these. Bismuth yellow is an intense semi-opaque yellow with excellent light fastness. These ones with the chemical sounding names generally are new generation organic pigments that will be light fast. Yellows, there's very little, difference from one yellow to the other. And by the way, I'm sure they don't make Gamboge or Indian yellow these days out of cow urine. Let's see. The blue, let's talk a little bit about the blues. Blues, we've talked somewhat about it. To me, there is a much wider variety of blues than any other of the three primary colors. We've talked about cerulean blue and cobalt blue. Those are old pigments, but they've been updated by chemists. Ultramarine blue is a standard warm purplish blue, a brilliant blue pigment with moderate to high tinting strength, which when they say high tinting strength, they usually are talking about how intense the color is, how strong it is, the range, in other words. And it's very transparent, oddly. You seem to be frozen. Can you still hear me talking?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can still hear you.
Okay, well, I'm moving and my picture isn't, but whatever, as long as you can hear me. Ultramarine blue was made with lapis lazuli, so it was very expensive, and they developed, I believe, Prussian blue to come up with a less expensive blue. And then and also French, I found that out while I was doing this research. French ultramarine blue is the same as ultramarine blue, but let's see, it granulates more evidently in the modern paints. I think from my use of it, I quit using it because it wasn't as strong a color as regular. So Donna, my face is not moving at all. I mean, that's not a problem to me, but
I know. Can you all see Becky frozen?
I can't even see Becky right now. The screen is black.
oh,
Oh,
that's okay.
Well, one thing you can do, Becky, is stop your video and restart it right next to the mute when you, and
Okay,
it should pop back up.
not that you really need to see me, especially, but we have the spinning blue wheel going on. Really, I think I've covered about everything.
Becky, would you talk about, do you like using Prussian blue?
Oh, yeah, I love Prussian blue, but it's got some history to it. It's let's see my notes here. It's semi-transparent, deep blue with a greenish undertone, very intense, similar to phthalo. It can behave erratically and less reliably in oil and watercolor, depending on the manufacturer. For permanent painting, phthalo blue is considered a more reliable choice. Prussian blue is mildly toxic if ingested, or if you heat it up. Don't put your Prussian blue on the stove. And in general, don't swallow any of it. I tell my students only one main rule in this class, and that is don't drink your paint water.
Yeah.
Okay, my video is just not responding at all. So
Can I ask you one more question, Becky? You
Yeah,
know,
how
when I did a UPO class with you, you did that scene where you used a blue and a sepia, but I can't remember. I didn't write it down and I've been looking at what we did and I can't find it. What blue and brown did you mix to get such a good rich combination of color? Do you remember when we did a water scene kind of with mountains or something above it? It was kind of abstract.
Uh-huh.
There was a combination of a blue and of a brown, and I can't remember what it was, but it was
Yeah.
really brilliant.
Probably cerulean blue.
And what do you think it would have been sepia or burnt umber, or what do you?
My favorite brown is Daniel Smith raw umber.
Raw umber.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that, and Lori Amick was very fond of that color too. It, or is, I don't know, she still does watercolor painting, but it, I don't know. This
Thank you.
technology is throwing me. Yeah. I really, Dawn, I think I'm done.
Okay.
Told you about everything I know. I can send a list of the pigments and their numbers if you want to Dawn, and she can, and you can get a hold of her and she can send those to you.
Sure, we can do that. Is that something that might be useful to put on our website?
Sure. Yeah. And that would refer, that would go all paints, not just watercolor. That particular, that list of the pigment numbers.
Okay, yeah, I saw Chris nod that she could put that document on our website. So you can send it to me, Becky, and I'll send it to her. And then Chris said she could also put that sheet that you're just reviewing on our website. I also just put it in the chat. It's a PDF document of all the notes that you had sent out in the packet that people got. And I put it in the chat, and then Chris can also put it on our website. Thank you, Chris. And also there are more packets at the museum. Everyone who is on here didn't request a packet. So if you would like one that has those watercolor dots in it, you can go to the museum and pick up a packet just until they run out. And Becky, did you say that in the packet you also had the notes? Yes. Yeah, Jerry's saying, yep, it's here. Okay. Jerry's been the only one on my screen so far because I have it on speaker view, but she's muted. Funny, no one else is saying anything. So, okay, are there any other questions?
Thank you. This was interesting. Thank you, Becky and Dawn.
You're welcome. Yeah, Josette Raleigh said thank you. Nice. And Jerry Art said thank you. Oh,
And this has been recorded so that we can share it, or will you make it available?
yep, we'll do that.
So will it be available through the Art League website?
Yes, I
Page.
can put it on the Becky Brody page, and it'll be listed by under events.
Great. Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So Becky, we do have for you, is she still here? Becky, are you here?
Maybe not. I think she was having problems with her computer.
Oh no. So we have a gift certificate for Becky to Artist Own to thank her for this.
Good.
And then also on November 9th at 7 p.m., our next speaker is Stacy Quick. And she is part-time working at the YWCA, and she runs the Expressions art group, which is for trauma victims. And she leads them through art to process things. And I did attend one of her classes and it was great. And it's it's a little different than what I do in my office. I'm a clinical psychologist and I use art to help people with their issues. And so I invite you all to join us then. And she also has a packet that you can pick up at the museum. And it has a lot of information in there. And I think it has supplies for you to participate. So you'll want to do that. But I can check to make sure. She did tell me what was in there. So we'll list it on the website so you can decide if you want to pack it or not. So that's November 9th at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. And we have our annual art museum meeting coming up on Thursday. I hope you can all attend. We're giving away the Arts League Exemplary Award, Exemplary Person Award. So, any other questions? What, Chris?
It looks like Barbara has a question.
Yes, Barbara has her hand raised. No, not anymore. Oh, she's on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, no, I don't have a question, but I just want to say how much I enjoyed this too, all that information.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I enjoyed it too. I thought it was insightful and eye-opening. So great. Well, have a nice day, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye.